In early July, however, Cedric Bell's secretary finally did call, and I felt that I had been given a reprieve. She apologized for her tardiness and asked me more questions about my taste in food and lodging, and then informed me of the date 3 weeks later, when a car would call to take me to the airport in Williamsburg. An East America jet would fly me from there to Charlotte, from whence I was to be picked up by a helicopter. A helicopter! Less than a month later, I stood before the craft, which was painted head to tail in East America's green and gold insignia, polished to a shine with a 6-man passenger bay and red, white, and blue sponsons over the wheels. One does not remain at St. Benedict's for 5 decades without gaining a certain familiarity with privilege. Yet as it lifted me off the pad in Charlotte, hovered for a moment, then lowered its nose and turned eastward over the gentle hills, and then the chopping slate of the sea channel, I felt a headiness that I had never known before. It was what Augustus Caesar must have felt millennia ago, carried head high on a litter past the Tiber. I clutched my notes to my chest. Indeed, I wondered what my life might have been like if I had felt this just once in my youth. The rotors buzzed like a swarm of bees above us. On the island, I was shown to a suite of rooms in a high corner of the lodge, with windows and balconies overlooking the sea. For a conference on the future of childhood education or the plight of America's elderly, of course, you could not get 1/10 of these men to attend. But for a privileged romp on a private island, it had merely been a matter of making the arrangements. I stood at the window of my room and watched a helicopter ferry back and forth across the channel, disgorging on the island a who's who of America's largest corporations, universities, and organs of policy. Oh, but what it was to see the boys! After a time, I made my way back to the airstrip, and whenever the craft touched down on the landing platform and one or another of my old students ducked out, clutching his suit lapel as he ran clear of the snapping rotors, I was struck anew with how great a privilege my profession had been. That evening, all of us ate together in the lodge, and the boys toasted me and took turns coming to my table, where several times one or another of them had to remind me to continue eating my food. Sedgwick Bell ambled over and with a charming air of modesty showed me the flashcards of Roman history that he'd been keeping in his desk at East America. Then, shedding his modesty, he went to the podium and produced a long and raucous toast referring to any number of pranks and misdeeds at St. Benedict's that I had never even heard of, but that the chorus of boys greeted with stamps and whistles. At 8:45, they all dropped their forks onto the floor, and I feared that tears came to my eyes. The most poignant part of all, however, was how plainly the faces of the men still showed the eager expressiveness of the first form boys of 41 years ago. Martin Blythe had lost half his leg as an officer in Korea, and now among his classmates he tried to hide his lurching stride, but he wore the same knitted brow that he used to wear in my classroom. Deepak Mehta, who had become a professor of Asian history, walked with a slight stoop. Yet he still turned his eyes downward when spoken to. Fred Massoudi seemed to have fared physically better than his mates, bouncing about in the Italian suit and alligator shoes of the advertising industry. Yet he was still drawn immediately to the other do-nothings from his class. But of course, it was Sedgwick Bell who commanded everyone's attention. He'd grown stout across the middle and bald over the crown of his head, and I saw in his ear, although it was artfully concealed, the flesh-colored bulb of a hearing aid. Yet he walked among the men like a prophet. Their faces grew animated when he approached, and at the tables I could see them competing for his attention. He patted one on the back, whispered in the ear of another, gripped hands and grasped shoulders, and kissed the wives on the lips. His walk was firm and imbued not with the seriousness of his post, it seemed to me, but with the ease of it, so that his stride among the tables was jocular. He was the host and clearly in his element. His laugh was voluble. I went to sleep early that evening so that the boys could enjoy themselves downstairs in the saloon, and as I lay in bed, I listened to their songs and revelry. It had not escaped my attention, of course, that they no doubt spent some time mocking me, but this is what one grows to expect in my post, and indeed, it was part of the reason I left them alone. Although I was tempted to walk down and listen out from outside the theater, I did not. The next day was spent walking the island's serpentine spread of coves and beaches, playing tennis on the grass court, and paddling in wooden boats on the small inland lake behind the lodge. How quickly one grows accustomed to luxury. Men and women lounged on the decks and beaches and patios, sunning like seals, gorging themselves on the largesse of their host. And as for me, I barely had a moment to myself, for the boys took turns at my entertainment. I walked with Deepak Mukta along the beach and succeeded in getting him to tell me the tale of his rise through academia to a post at Columbia University. Evidently, his career had taken a toll, for although he looked healthy enough, he told me that he had recently had a small heart attack. It was not the type of thing one talked about with a student, however, so I let his revelation pass without comment. Later, Fred Mazzaldi brought me into the tennis court and tried to teach me to hit a ball, an activity that drew a crowd of boisterous guests to the stands. They roared at Fred's theatrical antics and cheered and stomped their feet whenever I sent one back across the net. In the afternoon, Martin Blythe took me out in a rowboat.